The question I get asked a lot is, why, Gary, are you doing EFT? Why do you put so much energy behind it? Why did you even bring it out in the first place? And, that just sort of evolved over time. I probably wouldn't have done it at all if I hadn't had my spiritual experience back in 1988, because that was a big shift for me, mentally, emotionally. Before that time, I was the typical American. I was going to do a business, and I was going to raise a family, and I was going to be somebody, and all these other things that our ego tends to have us want to do, to be somebody, to be better than, and all of that stuff. And then in 1988, I had this spiritual experience. I just fell into this thing when I was in the arms of the Creator, and the whole world that I thought was so, so real just vanished in place of a world that we're just not aware of typically. But the world that I was seeing, the world we see now, it just kind of vanished, and here comes, I was in the arms of God, and it was just this big gasp. And after that, it left an impression on me, an indelible impression that just would not go away. It shifted everything. In what you might say were subtle, but yet very powerful ways. I still seem to be the same guy that I was beforehand, but I was much softer. And as I eventually came across what became EFT, if I'd been using my previous self, I would have said to myself, gee, what a great tool. How much money can I squeeze out of this thing? How can I profit from it to the best and make the most money out of it and be famous and all of this, So, but I didn't do that. I didn't do it because of this other experience. This other experience is it's like when you've had it and no one else or very few people have had it. It's so hard to explain something like everything is one, yet our senses tell us, no, everything is separated out, And everything is love. How do you explain that when we live in a world where there's angers and resentments and wars and all kinds of problems and poverty and everything else, okay? How do you explain that to somebody? What it was like, I would try. I would tell people about it, and they'd be polite and nice and all that, but they really didn't get it. And it's sort of like I had run into an endless pot of gold at the end of a rainbow someplace, and I knew where the pot of gold was, and I want to go out and tell people, come on, here's this pot of gold, come see the gold. You can take as much as you want, and there's always more there, so everybody come. It's for everybody. It's, it's the kind of thing you share. But the other part of the share wasn't really there. People weren't warming up to it, regardless of how much I talked about it. But this pot of gold, it wasn't just the monetary value of some gold coins in a pot. It was really a pot of joy, a pot of peace, a pot of awareness and love that is just so far beyond our experience here. And while I was in that experience, one of the things that it was very clear to me was there was an immense healing power. In that experience, everything that we think about here sort of vanishes, and there's no such thing as anger, grief, guilt, diseases, death, any of that. There's just nothing but laughter and joy and peace and love. That's all there is there. So hard to put our head around, okay? But yet such a big challenge to bring to the public, okay? And I was really motivated to do that. And when I came across a few years later what eventually became EFT, I kept asking people. I said, well, okay, but I had this spiritual experience. We've got this thing where you can tap on the meridians in the body, and it does a whole lot of things for the therapeutic process. Reduces it down to, minutes and hours instead of weeks, months, and years sometimes. Remarkable. You do things with it you can't do with man-made techniques, including a lot of medical things and stuff like that. But people really weren't listening. So I just brought out EFT without the spiritual component. But I was driven. I was always driven. There's something bigger here. But EFT took off. The world started using it. People started to recognize there are things beyond all the man-made techniques that are out there. There could really be a marvelous healing technique. So it started to open minds, and millions started to use it. Great. Wonderful. Wonderful. The back of my mind always was, but, this is great. This is wonderful. Tapping is, people love it and they're getting good results. Wonderful. But there's a bigger point still. We're missing the big one. Okay. We're seeing a little pot of gold, not the big pot of gold. Okay. So time went on, and eventually, as I would keep asking people questions tell them about my spiritual experience, and now people would start to warm up. Oh, really? Well, tell me some more about that. And as I had discussions with people, I would find that there was sort of in a way, a movement away from formal religions into more of a spiritual practice that people were sort of doing on their own. That doesn't mean, formal religion is out of the way, but there was this shift going on. There was a spiritual awareness people had, even though they hadn't had my experience. They were reading books about people who have had that experience. They were starting to listen to quantum physics, which has scientifically proven that this whole world we see is an illusion. They're not calling it a pot of gold, but they're pointing to the pot of gold out there. There's nothing there but a oneness in reality. So people are starting to open their eyes a little bit. The awareness is starting to come about. And so, now is the time to interject another level into EFT. So I knew it was going to be this spiritual thing. We had to bring this pot of gold to the rest of the world. It was just so important to do because, the world as we would see it was just, it certainly had its pleasures, which kept us attracted to the world. It had its difficulties as well, okay? Lots of them. And I could see where this pot of gold or this pot of joy and love and awareness that is the real reality, far more real than what we think is real in this separated world. If we could even get a piece of that, if we could start climbing a stairway to miracles, if you will, where we could start on a beginning step and then gradually get to the point where this awareness of this real reality starts to come home. Now that's a great motivator. Oh, what a motivator. And so, I set EFT up originally because I didn't want to set it up to see how much money I could make. The goal was how many people can I affect with it? That's a much different goal, okay? How many people can I affect with it? And now the goal starts to be how many people can I introduce this pot of joy to? So that people start to climb their stairway to miracles and start going, yes, I see it. Yes, I'm in this body. Yes, we have this world to deal with. Now I start to see this. I see something. Now we climb some more steps up the stairway to miracles. And I see it more, and I see it more, and I see it more. And as the higher we go, the more we're willing to let go of all of the ego stuff that surrounds us and that we seem to be immersed within. Okay? And we start to see this pot of joy. So we do that. And we find that there's a lot more freedom involved as we climb the stairway to miracles towards the pot of joy. So I began adjusting EFT to what is now called optimal EFT. We began bringing in this spiritual presence, which I wanted to make sure it was non-denominational, so I didn't step on the toes of any specific religion and so on. So we're really talking about the spiritual dimension. We're talking about ultimate source, but we give it the name the unseen therapist. Non-denominational name. You could replace the name unseen therapist with any name you wish. God, Jesus, Allah, Buddha, higher power, source. It doesn't matter what name you give it, what name you're comfortable with. It is still the essence of that, is this ultimate healing love, which belongs in any kind of a healing process.